Welcome, everybody. X Factor here. Simon Clemens, your host. Excited today with me, my guest, Kyle Ochs, the president of Team Indiana, coming to us from Southern Indiana, Kyle. And is that right?
No, Indianapolis, brother. Indianapolis, yeah.
Are you north or south in Indianapolis?
Well, we're kind of I personally am right in sort of the Butler downtown-ish sort of area. Obviously, our program reaches north and south, but I'm physically right now in Indianapolis.
Okay, and so Kyle is one of the real leaders in youth football in Indiana. Kyle, you've been doing it for quite a while. I know that your roots go back to you played at Butler. Is that right?
Yeah. Played at Butler. Really consider Indianapolis my home. I went to high school in Anderson, Indiana, sort of a northeast suburb of Indianapolis, but really came to Indianapolis and been here. Played at Butler. Had a great career there, and started coaching right away, and then really been doing the Team Indiana football thing for, I want to say, about 11, 12 years now. But yeah, I've coached pretty much every level other than the pros, in some way, shape, or form. So I've been football's been good to me, and so we're just trying to give back,
Yeah, no, and so can you talk a little bit about, you said 12 years Team Indiana. I think one of the things that most impressed me about your group, it seems that you have a really broad reach. You've managed to bring together a great group of athletes and parents who really love the sport. They want to invest their youth development in the sport. Can you talk about like where it started, why you felt like there was a need for it in Indiana, and what, where you saw that gap and how you sought to fill it?
Yeah, sure, for sure. And so I was around with the Will Rutherford founded Team Indiana football, like I said, about 12, 13 years ago. And originally was an FBU program. And so it was founded because of a need for additional competition, especially in that 7th and 8th grade age group here in Indiana. So there's some schools, some high schools that run really, really strong programs, K through 6, and then 7th, 8th is strong. And then, of course, their high school's dominant. And those programs exist, but they're few and far between. The real norm is a pretty significant drop-off in play in 7th and 8th grade. And so Will noticed that, and he created the organization. And so for about 4 or 5 years, we played in the FBU tournament, and left them, and then really have been doing our own thing ever since then. But the goal is just to provide additional opportunities. Again, football, and I'll get on my soapbox here a little bit, but football is unique in that there really isn't sort of a club component to it. You look at baseball, you look at soccer, you look at volleyball. There's really 2 seasons and all that. Track, I mean, there's just 2 seasons and everything, and football really doesn't have that. And that's not a big deal for your skill players in particular, who maybe, because we're huge into multi-sport athletes, we want to support that. All the science says that's what's best for players who want to play in college, and so that's fantastic. But what if I'm not into track, or maybe I'm a big guy and I don't want to wrestle, whatever. Now all of a sudden I get this sort of 8-game middle school season with maybe not great coaching, and now all of a sudden maybe I'm a really good player. So now I'm just throwing guys around, and that's my season, right? And did I really get better, right? And so we saw this need to step into that 6th, 7th, 8th grade window and challenge some of those players and give them more developmental opportunities, and that's what we've been trying to do.
I think that's interesting you bring it up and frame it that way, because it's actually, I've always found it fascinating, football in general. When a college coach talks about recruiting a high school athlete, if that kid is maybe he gets on the radar as, after his sophomore year or whatever, there's a good chance he's only played 16 high school games at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but for, football is so much about the collective team and the finer skills within each position. So how does Team Indiana, and how do you think youth football is approaching that with the middle school athlete? Because it is a different body too that you're dealing with. It's
so challenging. And parents, I think it's hard to get the parents to understand. You pointed out the sort of specialization, if you, again, and I'm not trying to make football sound, harder than another sport to coach or whatever. But again, you look at take baseball, for instance, right? Well, we all need to be able to hit. We all need to be able to field. We all need to be able to throw, right? And if we can do those 3 things, we're going to be pretty competitive, right? In the football arena, how I'm teaching a rush defensive end is completely different than how I'm teaching a linebacker, which is completely different than how I'm teaching a defensive back. And that's just one side of the ball, right? And so now one of the real challenges for a program like ours is, how do we get the level of instruction we need to actually push the development forward for these players, okay? And yet do it at a price point where parents can afford to attend, right? And that has been a 10-year struggle, right? Because obviously we don't, we get complaints of, well, daddy ball, okay? Well, okay. Why? So we're working really, really hard to find more and more, non-parent coaches, but financially it's really difficult. We're trying to put together a 6 or 7 person staff, that travels to out-of-state tournaments. There's just a lot of cost components that parents
and the best person for that staff is the guy who's already given up his weekend because he's going to be there anyway, right? Like
that's a real component, right? That's a real component to it. And again, you look at if I'm doing volleyball, for instance, I hire 2 coaches and pay one the head coach fee and and that's it. And okay, well that's affordable then. It's not affordable; it's still expensive, right? But if I was to try to pay 6 or 7 coaches, so anyway, that development piece is really, really challenging, and yet just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't need to do it, right? So we've been fighting that and wrestling that to ground. And we get better every year. We get better staff every year. We recently expanded to a north-south model, okay, and really we doubled in size, and we have no employees. It's all volunteers, and so you talk about trying to herd kittens. It's really, really needed. So that's part of why we work at it so hard. Is these players need the attention of these coaches, so I always tell people we don't have a kid problem, we got an adult problem, right? We got to figure out how to get the adults lined up and ready to go to help these kids, and that's a lot of what we're doing.
It's fascinating. I was reading something the other day, and football is the one sport where you practice. So if you're a baseball player, 2 guys can go and you can simulate a number of baseball activities with 2 or 3 dudes. You can put a kid on the mound, you can throw BP, even by yourself with a tee. You can simulate a hitting environment and just repeatedly do over and over and over again what that looks like. If you're basketball, the easiest sport to go and by yourself, you can simulate Kobe Bryant's warm-up shooting. If you did that every day for an entire summer, you're going to come into the fall basketball season. You're going to be a much better player if you're willing to commit to that, and you can do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Football, there is no individual work. Even passing a football with a wide receiver is such a far difference between what that actually looks like in the game versus.
We got we see a lot of players that can throw a nice football in camp when nobody's running at them and knocking them down.
And a lot of guys who are fast when they don't need to find a hole that's committed by the offense. And a lot of guys, the whole construct of football just depends on so much more support to actually learn the sport. And I think, it's been interesting because I do think with this rise of 7v7 and now flag is coming into play, at the skill positions, you are seeing more reps being had, and players are different coming in for, especially.
And we're behind in the Midwest, in that regard. Texas has been doing that stuff a lot longer than we have. Well, of course, they have weather components that help, but and I think we also, one of the things that challenges, and I'm getting off topic a little bit, but challenges the 7-on-7 piece is because in Indiana, a lot of our football players are multi-sport athletes. Now they can't really fully participate in 7-on-7 because they're doing baseball or they're doing, track or whatever. And again, I'm all for that. I want that to happen, but you're right. So we're getting a little progress. I love that flag it's gonna take off. It's gonna go crazy and it's gonna be great. But again, it still leaves some of those there. How am I get better at tackling? If I'm a linebacker, if I'm a D lineman, an O lineman. So yeah.
Well, and I guess that's ultimately what I'm getting at is you are seeing the 7-on-7 and the flag stuff bleed into the NFL now. Guys like Patrick Mahomes are making passes that 20 years ago you wouldn't have even considered. It's against the rules to do that. And from the 7v7 flag, now you got guys that are trained on these quick release, hitch route, whatever, and things are, he's moving to his left, he's throwing across the field to his right. That's a 7v7 pass or whatever. But like you said, I mean, at the skill or at the actual meat and potatoes positions, what does youth development, what should it look like for linemen?
Yeah.
What should
Yeah.
it look like for linebackers? How do you teach safe tackling?
Sure. Well, I know that with the All-State game was one of the reasons that we were excited to get involved, with your camp and your experience, right? Because it is a real challenge, and we're very cautious in sort of the developmental opportunities that are presented, to our families. And this because you and I talked about it at length before we ever did anything publicly. But at the end of the day, there is this need for development. That's really the kind of the drum we've been banging. And your All-State game is going to come to Indiana for, I think it's only the second time, right? This summer.
Year 2, Franklin College. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's fantastic. And it's going to be in a window of time where kids aren't in school, and obviously every parent's got to make a decision if it's the right spot for their resources, right? But at least it's an opportunity for 3 days to bring together a like-minded athletes, athletes that are going to be able to compete together, help each other get better, be good practice partners, right? It's a lot more than just the game, right? And then obviously we hope that you and I put together a great coaching staff that then are there pouring into these players. And if we can get that done, then now all of a sudden those 3 days become a nice sort of catalyst as they head into the fall.
Well, and I think you bring up some great points there, and I want to talk about a few of them, because where is a youth parents athlete getting surrounded? So we can, again, we talked already about 7v7 and flag. When we talk about installing a playbook, when you talk about positional training, dedicated positional training, that's getting into, this is pad work, this is how we set, this is how we launch, do the finer skills for the middle school. I think that's a massive miss there. And there is no way that the fall season comes and goes and that 9 months later, when has that kid even put on a pair of shoulder pads or done any of the work or the techniques or thought about the game in an immersive context that allows them to grow? When did that happen?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And especially when, like you said, you layer in the padded component, right? And because there are all kinds of other camps you can go to that are still developmental camps, and they serve a purpose. But you're exactly right. Football's a little bit unique where where we need to have some of that equipment on to really kind of test and tweak the fine tuning of the actual techniques. And so I think that's going to be really a positive component of the
it's
event.
A simulated game environment. It's at the end of the day, right? And the other thing, the off-field component of the All-State game, there's a lot of time dedicated to playbook, understanding X's and O's, talking with coaches directly, more like you would in your season about here's how we expect everybody to move here. We're going to walk through, like, this lineman's pulling here to block this. Do we pick that up? Those are, the more we get into it, it gets me really excited, because I think, to me, that is the dynamic that when I look at the real fit of a group like Team Indiana, quality youth football training, that's really what you guys are providing in your season outside of the school season, right? Is this opportunity to do some X's and O's, think about the game from that tactical perspective of how should a lineman be thinking about what are they supposed to be doing on the field, etc. So there's the technique element, but there's also the tactical element. And the All-State game is sort of like full immersion. We're going to do both. Yeah,
no, totally. It's almost like a little mini season in and of itself. And there's the awkward get to know your teammates. I love the social component of it, right? I mean, it's hard for middle school athletes to come together, student athletes, socially, right? And then of course it's not hard in some ways too, right? They take off and they're buddies and they have that conversation. And that's one of the fantastic things about our program, which I think will be mirrored in the All-State game, is bringing together these student athletes from such a broad geographic range, a broad socioeconomic range. It's really going to be cool when they come together and they, get that practice at meeting new people, at, talk about who they are, even the non-football things is going to be really cool.
Okay, Kyle, I hear you talking, and I haven't bring this up, but you're also a performance coach, right?
Well, I do a lot of leadership development stuff, and then of course I've done a lot of training of my own kids. I have 4 kids that all play in college, but mostly mostly leadership development stuff is what my passion
but the
is.
leadership stuff, I mean, again, the reason that your last comment stood out to me on that context is that's really a sports psychology aspect. I think that there's an element here where one thing that we should always seek to do is put an athlete in an environment where they get an opportunity to rise together. And so, like if I'm a high performing athlete in my local town or community. So say I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I'm one of the better athletes. And, 6th, 7th grade, you start to get a sense of that. Like, oh, you're winning a lot of the whatever contests or whatever, going out on the basketball court, maybe you're dominating there or, whatever field, those kids are sort of rising. This is the opportunity to kind of go, well, this kid from Fort Wayne can play this kid from Carmel, can play this kid. And we get them isolated in drills together where they can really, kind of butt heads a little bit, but in the most positive way of like, just can you grow and challenge yourself against players that want it, that want
100%. 100%. One of the big sort of, selling points I try to give families when they're considering whether to join Team Indiana football or not, is, and I mentioned this briefly early on, but, especially in that 7th, 8th grade range where, especially at schools where, again, the high school's maybe not as involved as they could be, and there's not as much structure, and maybe the coaching isn't quite where it wants to be. And I think that's the majority of middle schools in Indiana. What that kid that you, as you said, starting to rise, right? They're hitting puberty. They're starting to recognize some true athleticism, and they just go out and they out athlete everybody, and they look great and they feel great and they're wonderful until they're a freshman in high school. Or a sophomore in high school, and now they can't out athlete everyone. And now they go, okay, coach, what was those techniques you were telling me about? Well, now they're behind, right? Conversely, we take that kid, and he's a great athlete, and we put him into our program where everybody's a great athlete, right? And so now it's 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He's trying to figure out, how do I beat this guy across from me, instead of trying to figure that out as a sophomore, right? And I think we'll have the same experience at the All-State game, where those folks are not only challenging each other, but because they're kids, they're also supporting each other. They want to win, but they want to pick that guy up as soon as he struggles too. And there's a lot of learning.
It's an awesome age group to work with for that. I mean, I think that what we see, again, we're only year 2 in Indiana, but like, the Idaho guys have been doing this for 20 plus years. And one of the, our main guys in Idaho, Cam Anderson, he always talks about one of the coolest things that happens after an all-state game is these kids they follow each other's socials. They're watching each other. They're in touch. They put together their own text chain. And what happens in those worlds is they're kind of checking in and setting the bar for each other. So, like, hey, how was your game this week? Or what workouts are you doing? Or what nutrition are you following? As those athletes pick up nuggets of information, they're able to distill it in a way that their peer group understands. And I think, you and I can talk all day as performance experts, as coaches, whatever, about what you should do. And that can be very black and white. Just follow this list and you will find it. Who's doing that when you're in 7th grade?
Yeah.
Pretty big ass for a 7th grader. Yeah. But if his buddy's doing something and they see it, oh, hey, no, I saw my buddy Kyle doing this diet or this, workout routine. That's cool. I'll try that. And I think there's a ton of value in that sort of distillation of concepts and bringing to the table in the peer group.
Totally agree. I mean, I got goosebumps when you described that, because that is exactly what happens within our Team Indiana football program. These kids, they create these bonds. Most kids, over 50% of our kids, if they're on the 6th grade team, they're going to be with us for 3 years. Those families are creating those bonds, which is similar to other travel programs. That sort of is not unique to football. But then to see these boys cheer for each other, like I said, through socials, and then they get into that a lot of them get into that college recruiting experience, which, as is very stressful. Very stressful for the family. Everybody wants to go D1. Like there's only so many of those opportunities, and then these kids are having to manage those expectations and the emotions, and to have sort of this tangential social network of guys that are going through it at the exact same time, and getting the same blow-offs or the same offers, or it's just a really cool support network. And I didn't really know that was going to be a thing when we first built Team Indiana. We were focused on the middle school. I didn't know if people would stay connected through their freshman and sophomore years, and they absolutely are. And they'll the pros will kind of do a jersey swap at the end. We don't swap
Awesome.
jerseys, but our guys will go out and get a photo at the 50-yard line after playing each other on a Friday night in high school. It's really, really cool stuff.
So can you talk a little bit, obviously, how big is Team Indiana? What age groups do you guys service? And so, like, when does a player enter your program, and what does that development curve look like? Like, when's the season start? How does that all work?
Yeah. So we are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we are all grade-specific teams. So we're not age-based. We're grade first. And we have always been that way. And, there's tournaments that, we have to play an older group because they're age-based and whatever. But and then, as I mentioned, we just recently expanded to North and South, and so we're now 6 total teams, right? Two at each, 2 at 6, 2 at 7, 2 at 8, and we once in a blue moon will have a 5th grader play for us, but again, the reality is our 6th grade teams are pretty elite, and so they're just a 5th grader just isn't quite there yet, right? And so a 6th grade, is as I mentioned before we started talking. 6th grade in Indiana is pretty robust. Our rec leagues, those all-star experiences, they're pretty built out. And so a lot of parents, when they're looking at Team Indiana, they don't start looking until 7th grade, okay? Because their 6th grade experience may, especially if you make a deep playoff run, you have plenty of football, right? But then 7th grade flips and it's the exact opposite. And so we tell a lot of our folks, hey, get involved in 6th grade, even though you think you don't need more football, because then you'll hit the ground running in 7th grade. And so, so that's kind of the age range. Geography, we're pushing ourselves really hard to get deep into the corners. We've got a strong presence in down towards Evansville with Gibson Southern High School. We've got a strong presence in East Central, which is down towards Cincinnati. Working on our Fort Wayne presence. Indianapolis, we've always had a stronghold. And then trying to get up in that region. I know you're kind of up in Chicago area. We're not up into that Northwest much at all yet. And some of that is facilities and, manpower and all those sort of things. But we're trying to truly represent the entire state, which is why we expanded to a North-South model. And then the final piece that I would make sure that people understand is we are very, very intentional to be supportive of the school structure. And so we do all of our camps over the summer in no pads because we sure don't want to get anybody hurt. We want them ready to go in the fall. We delay starting practices much later than a lot of programs, oftentimes not until that first weekend in October, where most middle schools are on fall break or wrapping up or they're done. And that's intentional, right? We want to build and have built a very successful relationship with the high school coaches because we want them to realize we're being complementary to the development that they're doing, just trying to add 3 or 4 more weeks of great football on the back end of their school experience. And so that's kind of how our structure works.
It sounds like you're pulling from a pretty broad geographic area. How do practices work? How do if you've got this Gibson Southern High School in Evansville, so you got 6th graders down there, how are they participating?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. So what we do is we typically only practice 1 day a week. Now they're a little bit long, sometimes 4, sometimes 5 hours. And that is really to reduce that travel time because it is not uncommon. Again, historically, almost all of our practice has been in Indianapolis. So now you're talking to Gibson Southern person's driving 2.5 hours to come to practice one way, right? Coaches, volunteer coaches driving to. So part of the expansion to North-South is also then expanding our practice facilities. So, for instance, we're doing a lot in Kokomo. Taylor High School in Kokomo has been a real blessing for us, providing us a north location. North is a little easier because you don't have the tow, right? So that tow down in southern Indiana really gets you more travel time. But, yeah, so we're trying to move those practices, but really we're doing them once a week on a Sundays typically Sunday afternoons, so families can still have their weekend and do what they want, get back, come to practice. And so that's kind of the model that's been working for us. And our biggest challenge now is just getting those north and south locations. We're doing some stuff in Columbus, and not just for camps, but then for practices too, to try to shorten some of that drive. But the reality is the parents are driving. It's pretty routinely they're driving.
Okay, so you structure it. So a 5-hour practice is more like a camp environment then. It's a structured full.
Yeah, so Yeah. So if you, yeah. So a lot of times a lot of teams will do a team meal in between for some team bonding stuff. But yeah, so you're thinking of whatever I would have accomplished on a Tuesday, Thursday, I'm now doing on the same day. So I'm doing all offense install, defense install, special teams, individual drills. We really push all of our players to practice on both sides of the ball. They may play one side of the ball, but we really try to push them to practice both sides of the ball, because really what we understand is we're developing that athlete for the high school. And as you know, they go to high school, and oftentimes it's like, I don't care where you want to play. Our team needs you to be the left guard, and you need to be the left guard. And so that's where you're playing. And so we want people to be prepared for that. Of course, we don't run into the same challenges, especially in middle school. All the anybody that's used to touching the ball, those parents, right? We'll have special conversations with them. Not everybody can be the quarterback. Not everybody can be the running back. And oh, by the way, your kid will never play running back in high school. He looks good right now, but he won't play in high school. Too slow, too big, too whatever. And so let's do your kid a service and make that transition now, so he's prepared for where he will play in high school. And that's hard for some families. And we actually lose some families over that, which is fine. We understand that people got to make choices.
So I did want to ask you a little bit about, kind of the selection process. How do you do I assume you do tryouts. How do you put your teams together, and what does that weekend look like,
Yeah. So we again have run a camp series for quite some time. Really the entire time I've been doing this, and we've been trying to improve it and change it and tweak it. One of the big changes is not everybody who comes to our camps are wanting to play for Team Indiana football. So one of it is our camp is now a true just service, an affordable way to get some of those non-padded reps, some of that experience. Our camp price is $35, and you know that you can't get a 2-hour camp somewhere for $35 and get a t-shirt. So that experience, that's part of it, right? Is just to give back to the community and get so if a high school hosts us, now that high school coach doesn't have to put on his own middle school camp, right? He just brings his kids out to ours. We've been trying to get that done, and it's slowly making progress. So when people register for our camp, they check a box. They want to be evaluated for Team Indiana, or they do not, right? And then what happens is, we have some high school coaches there. We have as many of our volunteer coaches that can be there, who are then running the drills. Again, everybody does an offensive side, everybody does a defensive side, have a little bit of competition time there and a combine, sort of experience. And then we're evaluating those players as well. And then from there, we make an email offer to them if we think that they fit, or we have a roster spot for them. From that spot, then they come in to pay a deposit if they want to accept the offer. And so it's a fluid thing throughout the entire summer. So we'll have camps. Our first one is June 7th. Then we'll obviously be evaluating folks at the All-State game as well. There's another showcase in Indianapolis in late June. Then we'll have it in July. We'll have one in September. We'll have one in August. And by middle of September, then we will have offered out hopefully about 30 spots per team. So we should be somewhere around 180 rostered players that then take about a 2 or 3 week break while they're finishing up their school season, and then hit the ground running with us in early October.
For the 7th and 8th graders, are they reporting to middle school football season in the fall? Is that how Indiana's structured? And are those generally overseen by the high school coaches, or how does that relationship work?
So I mean, so every school is different. Some 7th and 8th middle school systems literally don't start football until school starts. Most start 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time, try to get some conditioning in, because the games really start when school starts. The best ones are starting right in the summer, like the high school, and mirroring it, and they're involved in the high school program. And now all of a sudden, when middle school starts, they just happen doing their middle school game. So it's a really across the board kind of a catch-all. And again, for us, if you were going to attend a camp, you're talking a non-padded 2-hour experience, so it doesn't interrupt their summer football plans, or even if they're travel soccer or whatever else they're doing, they can squeeze one of our camps in to be evaluated. And then again, we really start to demand most of their attention in the end of October, and most middle school seasons are done by then.
Okay. In terms of the competitive leagues that you guys, obviously as a travel team, is it all Indiana? Are you going to, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago? Like what is your, how, because I know I'm in Chicago. So for example, the Chicagoland Youth Football League, TCYFL, is like a huge, it's, I don't know honestly how many teams are up here, but it's a massive group. And then, they're playing across the Chicago suburbs. You're in sort of a different situation down there. How does that competitive calendar look, and who do you play?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And so what we do, it's really a challenge to find great tournament experiences. I host one that I host in Indianapolis that all the Team Indiana teams play in. I didn't really have a desire to get into hosting a tournament experience, but we're tired of going to places and having thuggery and threatens in the parking lot and all the headlines you see in youth sports. That stuff's happening. And it's hard, especially in football, because we both know football is a super emotional sport, that it's really hard to find that really intense competitive experience, but that is only between the whistles. It's not in the stands. It's not in the parking lot, right? And so we really struggle with that. I'll be quite honest. We end up playing some of the same teams more than once because those same teams are trying to look for the same experience we're looking for, and we're showing up at either our tournament or we go to Kansas City, where a gentleman out there has been running a tournament for quite some time. He was a former FBU person, so he brought over a 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He's in Team Iowa, and so we've been playing that tournament quite a while. We've been playing in Rocky Top, but Rocky Top in Tennessee is not really our format. Again, it's really a age first format, and so that's not so it's not really like competition. So we want to play the best of the best, but want to do so in a sort of an environment where it's safe and positive, right? You want the competition experience to be challenging, but not threatening. And unfortunately, in the sports landscape, we can't get referees, we can't get facilities to host the events, right? We can't get people to come back because we got some bad actors, that are in the game for the wrong reasons. So we'll play. So historically, we'll play 3 mandatory tournaments, one in Indianapolis. Historically, it's been Rocky Top in Tennessee, and then Kansas City, and then we'll allow teams to play a 4th or 5th tournament if they want to.
Is that 6 games? Do you get guaranteed 3 games each, or how does that tournament break down?
Yes, it ends up being about 3 games unless you make a deep run. My tournament, I actually guarantee 2 games. We do a pretty traditional head-to-head model. So winners play for first, losers play for third. But it'll vary because again, a lot of these football tournaments, they've got the running clock going, bad refereeing, and now all of a sudden, did I really even have a competitive experience? Or was it I got lucky and scored a touchdown and then ate the clock? So it's like, so there's a lot of nuances like that our families don't quite understand. That a lot of families don't understand until they show up and then have the experience. So we're actually looking to expand and probably partner with someone else for an additional tournament weekend that we can control just for those exact reasons.
Well, we should, as a side note, but on the side, we should talk about that. I'd be interested in learning a little bit.
I'm actively doing that right now. Yeah.
And, I think, again, whenever I meet people like you, you brought up the bad actors, and you're 100% right. And it's finding, I think there's some people that are really dedicated to development. And I can just say that when I first met you, I met you through a guy, Jeff Plass.
Yep.
And Jeff was a fantastic, great guy. He was involved with Team Indiana, obviously, and introduced us. But it was clear from the get-go that you had the right development mindset, the right program mindset. Even just the fact what you just shared, $35 camps. You clearly are, invested heavily in the community and getting this right for the local player. I work across all sports, and I will say that over the last year, the thing that has stood out to me the most about football, which does make it different from the other sports, is how heavily invested the community is. And I think that comes from it being a high school model sport, not a club sport. I spent a lot of time on soccer fields. You go to an Arizona tournament, some great teams from around the country are playing, and none of your friends in the stands, none of your, you know what I mean? It's just such a weird environment. A bunch of college coaches are there. I know you're a volleyball dad. You saw tons of that, I'm sure. And then you go to football, and Friday Night Lights is still like the glue of the community. Everybody's out, and when we get that into the youth game, I think there's something really special happening there.
Yeah.
And honestly, the All-State game, what we're trying to do is to make this, the community of the state support and actively, I think that's at the heart of it. I mean, honestly, that's so coming to a place like Central, we're going to be in Central Indiana. We're going to be at Franklin College. I just think that, I can't emphasize the community element enough, because I think that is at the heart of this. That's what it really should be about. It's this broader youth football community that is engaged and, investing in youth development is really the goal.
I totally agree. And I have, as I mentioned, I have my hand in a lot of other arenas, and a lot of people will look at them. I told you I do a music festival, and I do Team Indiana football, and I do leadership development. I'm an adjunct professor, I'm an entrepreneur, whatever. And you think about, okay, well, they look all very different, but they aren't. And so if you look at what I spend time on, I think I told you this once before, but I have a personal credo that I focus on three things, right? So one is this idea of significance. Let's do something that matters. Let's have impact, right? And that's why I'm drawn to the nonprofit world quite a bit. Let's do something around love. Let's do something around connection, around community. Let's build true relationships, right? And let's do something around mastery. Let's learn. Let's get better and better at something. And so everything I'm involved with is focused on those three things. And I think you're exactly right that the football community wants to be connected. And it goes back to the point of these players exchanging their phone numbers and texting each other. That's natural. It's organic. All we had to do was get them in the same field and get them in the same room. And they took care of it from there. And that's huge. There's a lot of value in that, that I think your All-State participants are going to experience. I think the Team Indiana players experience this sense of connection is really, really important.
Well, putting everybody in the same room. I mean, you say that, and it's funny that is like, suddenly that feels like a novel idea.
Yeah. It's hard, though. It's hard. You know how hard it is. Heck, we just talked about registration numbers right before we got on the call. Like we're not where we really want to be, right? And it's hard. People are busy. There's information overflow. There's disinformation. It's just really hard to as adults to get. We can set the table. We still got to get them to come, and I think that we're both trying to do it the right way. And I appreciate you taking time today to talk and everything, because these are important topics that we got to get out there.
Well, I'm so excited to work with you on this project. It's been really awesome to just see. Again, I think like-minded. I think that, there's good synergy. I love your ethos, what you just shared, because I think that, honestly, when I put it, this way, does it fill your cup? You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you want to have conversations. You want to be engaged in things that fill your cup. And, my goal with the All-State game is to do that. And I think that we have a really great opportunity in Indiana to grow this and work together towards, just filling a lot of people's cups, bringing them into the same room, celebrating the community, and gathering people. And then, once you do that, the digital touch points can grow and flourish. But, before, if it's all just done digital, that's a very cold medium.
It's got to be real. Yeah, it's got to be real.
Yeah, you got to shake hands. You got to, give high fives and share love and spirit. And it's just all
I can tell you also, too, Simon, you may not. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I can tell you also, you may not be aware, but the head coach at Franklin College is a wonderful human being. Mike Leonard has been there a long time. He left and came back. Not only is it geographically a great location, the facilities are absolutely wonderful. And head coach Mike Leonard gets it, right? He's all about development. And he doesn't know you guys very well yet. Obviously, we need to make a good first impression. We need to do things right. But he's the right guy. Even have some of his staff is going to be coaching at the event, which, is hard to get done. College coaches are busy, and so have some college coaching out there. And so I think you're going to really your event is going to really benefit from that move to Franklin College.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and you're 100% right. Any chance, again, working with the right football coaches in the community and bringing everybody together. I think that the families that do choose to join us for this weekend are going to get, it's so much more than just the game. And I think, sometimes people get, they get caught up, oh, well, the cost, is $5.99 but at the end of the day, I view it and I'm like, this is a 3-day development experience. You're coming to, a great college in central Indiana to come and get a chance to play on a college campus, to compete on a college field, to do practice with high-level coaches, to get a chance to compete against high-level kids, to meet and grow with some great families and make some great connections. And I just think that there's so much good in all of that, that I'm really excited. I think having a dedicated partner like yourself is such a great value towards that end goal. And, you really have been just an amazing standard bearer for the sport in your state. And I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you and appreciate all the things that your team's doing. Shout out to Shannon and I know Claudia helped put this together, and just a real thank you to Exact Sports, because there's a lot. It takes a lot. This isn't easy to get done, and so we just really appreciate all the things you're doing.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for joining me on X Factor. I think we got a lot of good stuff here. Really appreciate, you're a welcome guest anytime. And let's get off the stuff this weekend, and we'll keep growing it, because last push now, and here we go.
That sounds great. Appreciate your time.